"I haven't had sex with a woman since the war," said the rancher to the captive virgin Apache woman. The sun rose slowly over the vast, dusty plains. Golden light spilled across the hills, catching the tops of the tall grasses that swayed gently in the morning breeze. At the edge of one of these plains stood a modest ranch, its wooden fences weathered by time and wind. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney of the main house, hinting at the warmth and activity inside. The rancher, a man named Thomas, had seen many seasons come and go. His face was lined with years of hard work, sun, and wind. The war had taken much from him, friends, family, and even his peace of mind, but the land had given him purpose. Each morning he rose before the sun, checking on the cattle, repairing fences, and planning for the day ahead. The routine was comforting. It reminded him that life continued, even after the chaos and sorrow of the past. That morning was different, though. A visitor had arrived, a young Apache woman. She was not a threat. Thomas had been told she was seeking refuge after the troubles that had affected her village. She walked with quiet dignity, her dark hair falling loosely over her shoulders. Her eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the ranch as she took in the open fields, the livestock, and the sturdy buildings. Thomas greeted her cautiously, unsure of what to expect. He offered water, food, and shelter, hoping to show kindness in a world that often gave little. The woman, though wary, accepted his help. She spoke little at first, observing the ranch and the routines with careful attention. Thomas, in turn, respected her silence. He understood the weight of loss and displacement. He had experienced it himself. As days passed, a rhythm formed. The woman helped with daily chores, feeding the animals, mending clothes, and preparing meals. She moved with ease and strength, showing skills Thomas had not expected. He learned to admire her resilience and intelligence. The ranch, once quiet and solitary, began to feel alive again. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, the shadows dancing on the walls of the house. Thomas shared stories of the land, of cattle drives, and of the seasons that marked life on the plains. The woman listened intently, occasionally sharing small stories of her own village and the people she had known. Though their worlds had been different, a quiet understanding began to grow between them. Thomas thought often of the war. It had left a mark on him that could not be erased. He spoke of it sometimes, carefully choosing his words. The woman listened without judgment, her presence a calm reminder that the past did not have to define the present. Together they began to navigate a new reality, one shaped by survival, trust, and mutual respect. The ranch was not without its challenges. Weather could turn harsh without warning, and the land demanded constant attention. There were times when Thomas felt the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders, but the woman's steady presence helped him bear it. She had endured hardship and uncertainty, and her courage inspired him to face his own difficulties with renewed determination. One afternoon, while repairing a section of the fence, Thomas paused to look out over the rolling hills. The wind carried the scent of sage and grass, mingling with the faint smoke from the chimneys of distant homesteads. He realized that the world, though scarred by conflict, was still full of life, and in that moment he understood that he was not alone. The woman, noticing his quiet reflection, approached and offered a small smile. It was a gesture of kindness, simple yet profound. Thomas nodded in return, feeling a sense of connection he had not experienced in years. The barriers between them, shaped by language, culture, and past experiences, began to soften, replaced by a shared respect and the possibility of friendship. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Thomas and the woman stood together, watching the cattle graze in the fading light. The ranch was quiet, yet alive with possibility. They had both endured hardship, and yet here they were, learning to trust again, to rebuild, and to find moments of peace in a world that had often been unforgiving. Night fell, bringing with it a blanket of stars. The sounds of the plains, the lowing of cattle, the rustling of grass, the distant call of an owl filled the air. In that quiet, Thomas felt a rare sense of calm. He thought about the future, uncertain as it was, and felt a spark of hope. The war, the losses, and the struggles were behind him, but life continued forward. And now he was not facing it alone. Through small acts of cooperation and understanding, a new chapter had begun. The ranch, the land, and the people who cared for it offered a chance to heal. For Thomas and the woman, this was only the beginning. The road ahead would not be easy, but together they would face it with patience, courage, and respect. And perhaps in time, they would discover that even in the aftermath of sorrow, life could still hold moments of beauty, laughter, and connection. The days on the ranch began to blend together, each sunrise bringing new tasks and challenges. Thomas rose early as always, the cold morning air biting at his face as he opened the barn doors. The cattle stirred and moved slowly, snorting and shifting in the straw. The rancher moved among them with practiced hands, checking for any signs of illness or injury. Each animal was important. They were not just livestock, but the lifeblood of the ranch. The woman, whose name was Ayana, had begun to feel more comfortable in this unfamiliar world. She had grown up with the land, but the vastness of the ranch, the fences, and the rhythm of ranch life were different from her village. Still, she adapted quickly, learning from Thomas and observing the routines carefully. She carried out her chores with grace and efficiency, feeding the animals, collecting eggs from the chicken coop, and helping mend torn blankets and clothing. As the days passed, Thomas began to notice small changes in himself. He had spent so many years alone after the war that he had forgotten how to share space with another person without tension. But Ayana's calm presence brought a sense of peace he hadn't realized he was missing. She asked questions when she didn't understand something, but never intruded. She offered advice in ways that were gentle and respectful, and slowly, Thomas began to see her not just as a visitor, but as someone who could become a part of this land and its life. One afternoon, a challenge arrived in the form of a storm. Dark clouds gathered quickly over the plains, the wind rising and bending the tall grasses. Thomas could sense the change in the air, the faint scent of rain mixing with the earth. "We need to secure the livestock," he said to Ayana, his voice firm but not hurried. Together they worked quickly, rounding up the cattle and moving them to the shelter of the barns. The chickens were gathered into coops, and supplies were brought inside the house to keep them dry. The storm struck with surprising force, rain hammering against the roof and wind whistling through the cracks in the fences. Thunder rolled across the sky, and lightning illuminated the fields in sharp bursts. Thomas and Ayana sat together in the main room, the fire crackling as they listened to the storm outside. In that moment they shared a quiet camaraderie, the kind born of facing a challenge side by side. Neither spoke much, words were unnecessary. The storm demanded attention, and in meeting it together, a deeper understanding grew between them. After the storm passed, the ranch was left damp and glistening, the grass sparkling with raindrops. Some fences had been damaged, and Thomas immediately set to work repairing them. Yana assisted, holding boards and passing tools, her hands steady and capable. As they worked, the sun broke through the clouds, casting warm light across the land. The smell of wet earth and grass filled the air, a reminder that even after a storm, life continued. In the evenings, Thomas would often take Ayana on walks across the plains. They would watch the cattle grazing, the sky painted with the colors of sunset, and the occasional deer or wild turkey moving through the grass. These walks were moments of quiet reflection, times when they could speak freely or simply enjoy the calm of the land. Yana shared stories of her childhood, tales of her family, and lessons she had learned from living closely with nature. Thomas listened, fascinated by her knowledge and perspective. In turn, he told stories of the ranch, of the animals, and of the hard work required to keep the land running smoothly. One day, while exploring a distant ridge, they discovered an old, abandoned homestead. The wooden structure had weathered decades, the roof sagging and the paint worn away. Thomas approached cautiously, examining the building for any danger, while Ayana followed closely. "This land has history," she said quietly, her eyes scanning the remnants of a life once lived here. Together they explored the homestead, finding remnants of the past, a rusted plow, broken dishes, and faded letters tucked away in a corner. These items told stories of people who had lived and worked here long ago, people who had faced challenges not unlike their own. The discovery sparked a conversation about legacy and survival. Thomas spoke about his family, the war, and the way life had forced him to adapt. Yana listened, then shared the stories of her people, their connection to the land, and the traditions that had shaped her identity. It was a learning experience for both of them, each gaining a deeper appreciation for the other's history. They began to understand that despite differences in culture and upbringing, the struggles of survival, the desire for peace, and the hope for a better future were universal. As the weeks turned into months, life on the ranch settled into a steady rhythm. The animals thrived, the fences held strong, and the fields yielded healthy crops. Thomas and Ayanna grew more confident in their ability to manage the land together. There was laughter now in the house, small moments of humor and joy that had been rare during Thomas's years of solitude. Ayanna had a keen sense of observation and often noticed details that Thomas missed, helping to prevent problems before they arose. Her presence made the ranch not just more productive, but more alive. One evening, a traveling trader arrived at the ranch. He brought news from nearby towns and settlements, stories of trade opportunities and items for sale. Thomas welcomed him, offering food and a place to rest. Ayanna was fascinated by the goods he carried, tools, fabrics, and spices that were new to her. They spent time talking with the trader, learning about the wider world beyond the plains. These interactions reminded them both that while the ranch was their home, the world was much larger, full of possibilities, and that connections with others could bring knowledge and support. During quiet nights, Thomas sometimes found himself reflecting on his life before the war. Memories of hardship, loss, and struggle surfaced, but so did memories of resilience and determination. Ayanna's presence reminded him that healing was possible, that the past could be acknowledged without letting it dictate the present. He realized that he had been carrying a weight for too long, and that sharing the burden, even in small ways, made it lighter. Ayanna, too, was learning to adapt. She had faced displacement and uncertainty, and now she was discovering that trust and cooperation could lead to security and peace. The ranch, once foreign and daunting, had become a place where she could contribute meaningfully, where her skills and knowledge were valued. She learned new techniques for ranch life, while teaching Thomas about the natural world in ways he had never considered. Their relationship was one of mutual growth, built on respect, understanding, and shared experiences. Spring arrived with gentle warmth, bringing new life to the ranch. Calves were born, chicks hatched, and the fields began to flourish with fresh green shoots. Thomas and Ayanna worked tirelessly, ensuring that the young animals were healthy and the crops tended. The cycle of life on the plains continued, reminding them both of resilience and renewal. It was a time of hope, a period in which past hardships seemed distant, replaced by the satisfaction of hard work and the promise of future growth. In these months, a bond of friendship deepened between Thomas and Ayanna. It was not loud or dramatic, but quiet and steady. They learned to anticipate each other's needs, to communicate without words, and to support each other through challenges. The ranch became more than a place of survival. It became a home, a shared space of trust, care, and understanding. By the time summer approached, the ranch had become a thriving hub of life. The fences stood firm, the fields were filled with crops, and the animals were healthy and strong. Thomas often paused to watch the land stretch out before him, the sun warming his face, the wind carrying scents of grass and wildflowers. Beside him, Ayanna moved with purpose, her presence a steady reassurance that they could meet whatever challenges came next. One evening, as the sky was painted with the soft colors of sunset, Thomas and Ayanna sat on a hill overlooking the ranch. They spoke of the future, of plans for new improvements, and of the small dreams that had begun to form. There was a sense of accomplishment, not just for the work they had done, but for the trust they had built, the understanding they had gained, and the quiet friendship that had blossomed between them. They knew that life would continue to bring obstacles. Weather could change, animals could fall ill, and unforeseen difficulties could arise. Yet they also knew that together they could face these challenges. Each day had taught them patience, perseverance, and the value of cooperation. And as they watched the sun dip below the horizon, they felt a shared sense of hope, that even in a world marked by hardship, new beginnings were always possible. With summer in full bloom, the ranch had transformed into a bustling, lively place. The fields were green and abundant, the calves grew stronger each day, and the birds sang from the trees that lined the property. Thomas and Ayanna worked tirelessly, but the hard work no longer felt burdensome. They had settled into a comfortable rhythm, one where each day brought small victories and quiet satisfaction. One morning, Thomas awoke to the sounds of the ranch. The roosters crowed, the calves lowed softly, and the wind rustled the tall grasses outside. He stretched, feeling the warmth of the rising sun on his face, and glanced toward the small cabin where Ayanna slept. She was already up, moving quietly through her morning chores. Thomas admired her diligence and determination. Her presence had brought new life to the ranch, and he often reflected on how different the place felt with her around. That day, Thomas decided to take the wagon to a nearby town to collect supplies. The trip would take several hours, and he invited Ayanna to come along. She agreed, eager to see the world beyond the ranch. They loaded the wagon with tools, food, and other necessities, and set off down the dusty trail. The road stretched out before them, winding through hills and open plains, the sunlight casting long shadows over the landscape. As they traveled, Ayanna asked questions about the towns and the people who lived there. Thomas explained that towns were places of trade and community, where news traveled quickly and goods from faraway places could be found. He described the markets, the blacksmiths, and the general stores, painting a vivid picture of life outside the ranch. Ayanna listened with curiosity, fascinated by the different ways people lived and worked. When they arrived in the town, the streets were busy with activity. Merchants called out from their stalls, children ran and played, and travelers moved about with purpose. Thomas and Ayanna visited the general store first, selecting supplies carefully. They needed food, nails, rope, and other essentials for maintaining the ranch. Ayanna helped him check the quality of each item, her keen eyes noticing details Thomas sometimes overlooked. Together, they ensured that the ranch would be well prepared for the coming months. After the shopping, they stopped at the blacksmith's shop. Sparks flew as the blacksmith hammered hot metal on his anvil, shaping tools and repairing equipment. Thomas had several pieces of equipment that needed attention, and Ayanna watched in fascination as the blacksmith worked. The heat, the rhythm of hammering, and the smell of metal and coal created an almost mesmerizing scene. Thomas explained the importance of maintaining tools and how proper care ensured that the work on the ranch could continue without interruption. While walking back through the town, they noticed children playing near a small park. Their laughter echoed through the streets, and Ayanna paused to watch. She smiled, a rare moment of relaxation and joy. Thomas noticed her expression and felt a sense of warmth. Despite the hardships they had both endured, moments like this reminded them that life could still offer happiness, small though it might be. On the journey back to the ranch, the sun began to dip toward the horizon. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple, reflecting on the open plains around them. Thomas and Ayanna rode in companionable silence, each lost in thought. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers and fresh grass, and the distant mountains were bathed in a soft, golden light. It was a peaceful scene, one that contrasted sharply with the memories of struggle and hardship they had both experienced in the past. Back at the ranch, evening chores awaited. They fed the animals, collected eggs, and ensured that the fences were secure. Ayanna had begun to anticipate Thomas's needs, passing tools without being asked and suggesting efficient ways to complete tasks. Thomas, in turn, had grown more patient and attentive, recognizing the value of teamwork and mutual respect. Their interactions were fluid, built on trust, understanding, and the shared goal of maintaining the ranch. One day, while tending to the fields, Thomas noticed that some of the crops were struggling. The soil in one section had become dry and cracked, despite regular watering. He scratched his head in frustration, unsure of what to do. Ayanna suggested rotating the crops and adding compost to improve the soil's quality. Together, they worked the earth, turning over the soil, adding nutrients and planting new seeds. Thomas marveled at Ayanna's knowledge of the land and her resourcefulness. Her ideas improved not only the immediate situation but also helped prevent future problems. The work was exhausting, yet fulfilling. By late afternoon, they paused to rest under the shade of a large tree. Ayanna handed Thomas a jar of water, and they drank in silence, the gentle breeze cooling their sun-warmed skin. Around them, the fields stretched endlessly, alive with the promise of growth and abundance. The cattle grazed peacefully, the birds sang, and the ranch felt like a world apart from the hardships they had endured. As summer deepened, Thomas and Ayanna began to notice more visitors from nearby settlements. Some came to trade goods, others to share news, and occasionally, a traveler sought shelter for the night. Thomas welcomed these interactions, recognizing the importance of building relationships with others. Ayanna, too, found herself curious about these newcomers, asking questions and learning about different ways of life. These encounters strengthened their sense of community and connected the ranch to the wider world. One afternoon, a neighboring rancher arrived to discuss a cooperative effort for the upcoming harvest. The man brought workers to help with the fields and offered advice on improving irrigation techniques. Thomas and Ayanna worked alongside them, learning new strategies and sharing knowledge from their own experience. It was a reminder that even in remote places, collaboration and mutual support could lead to greater success. Ayanna observed how the rancher and his workers interacted, noting the importance of communication and teamwork in achieving shared goals. Life on the ranch was not without challenges. Weather could change suddenly, and unexpected events required quick thinking. One evening, a herd of cattle wandered too close to the edge of a cliff. Thomas and Ayanna rushed to guide them back, working together to ensure that none of the animals were harmed. The experience was tense, but it strengthened their partnership. Each action, each decision, was a reminder that life on the plains demanded vigilance, cooperation, and trust. Through these trials, their bond continued to grow. They shared laughter when minor mishaps occurred and celebrated successes, no matter how small. The ranch had become a place where they could rely on each other, where their skills complemented one another, and where mutual respect formed the foundation of their relationship. It was a quiet, steady companionship, built on shared experiences and the understanding that both had endured hardship in the past. One particularly warm evening, they sat by the edge of the river that ran near the ranch. The water flowed gently, reflecting the colors of the sunset. Thomas skipped stones across the surface while Ayanna watched, her expression calm and thoughtful. They spoke of their dreams for the future, expanding the ranch, improving the fields, and perhaps one day welcoming more people to share in their life. Each idea was considered carefully, with input from both, demonstrating the partnership that had developed between them. Ayanna also began teaching Thomas some traditional techniques from her culture. She showed him ways to use local plants for medicine, tips for reading the land, and methods for preserving food naturally. Thomas listened intently, impressed by her knowledge and the practicality of her methods. He realized that survival on the plains required more than hard work. It required understanding, adaptation, and learning from others. Ayanna's lessons not only improved their day-to-day life, but also enriched Thomas's perspective on the world. As the weeks turned into months, the ranch continued to thrive. The crops were healthy, the animals strong, and the fields productive. Thomas and Ayanna had built a life that was sustainable and fulfilling, marked by cooperation, growth, and mutual respect. Each day brought a new opportunity to learn, to improve, and to strengthen their partnership. The evenings became a time for reflection and storytelling. Around the fire, they shared tales of their past, memories of family, and lessons learned from life's challenges. They spoke of hopes and dreams, of things they wished to achieve, and of the ways they had grown since arriving at the ranch. These moments fostered deeper understanding and connection, reinforcing the sense that they were no longer alone in facing life's challenges. One night, a particularly clear sky revealed countless stars. Thomas and Ayanna lay on a blanket outside, watching the constellations and sharing stories about the heavens. Ayanna recounted the traditional stories of her people, explaining how the stars guided them and carried lessons of bravery, wisdom, and resilience. Thomas listened, captivated, and found himself appreciating the depth of knowledge and culture she brought into his life. It was a moment of quiet wonder, a reminder that the world was vast and full of beauty. Through these experiences, the ranch became more than a place of work. It became a sanctuary. Thomas and Ayanna had faced the hardships of war, displacement, and isolation, but together they had created a home. A home where respect, trust, and understanding formed the foundation of daily life, where challenges were met with cooperation and successes celebrated together. As summer drew to a close, Thomas reflected on the journey so far. The land had healed in ways he hadn't imagined, and so had he. Ayanna's presence had brought vitality, knowledge, and companionship. Together, they had faced storms, managed the ranch, welcomed visitors, and learned from each other. They had proven that even after hardship, growth and resilience were possible. And so, the ranch continued, alive with the promise of the future. The bond between Thomas and Ayanna had strengthened through shared experiences, respect, and friendship. Their partnership had become a testament to patience, cooperation, and understanding. An example of how people, even from different worlds, could come together to build something lasting, meaningful, and beautiful. Autumn arrived quietly, painting the plains with shades of gold, red, and brown. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the distant smoke of neighbor ranches. The ranch had never looked more alive. The crops had been harvested, barns were full of hay and supplies, and the cattle had grown healthy and strong. Thomas stood on a small rise overlooking the land, feeling the satisfaction of months of hard work. The ranch was no longer just a place to survive. It had become a home, a place of accomplishment and peace. Yana emerged from the barn, carrying a basket of freshly collected vegetables. She had been working since dawn as usual, but there was a lightness in her step, a quiet pride in her eyes. Thomas smiled at her, noting how much she had become part of this land and its life. She approached him, and together they took a moment to survey the fields, the animals, and the structures they had nurtured into stability. It was a scene of quiet triumph, one that reflected their shared dedication and care. With the harvest complete, Thomas and Ayana focused on preparing the ranch for the coming winter. They repaired fences, reinforced the barns, and stored extra food for the animals. They checked the water supply and ensured that all tools were in order. The work was demanding, but the routine now felt natural. Each task was approached with efficiency, and the partnership they had built over the past months made every chore smoother and more rewarding. Despite the hard work, there was time for reflection and learning. Yana taught Thomas more about the land's natural cycles, the medicinal uses of local plants, and the traditional methods of preserving food. Thomas shared stories of his family, his experiences during the war, and the lessons he had learned from ranch life. They spoke of dreams, hopes, and plans for the future. Through these exchanges, their connection deepened, grounded not in romance but in mutual respect, trust, and a shared sense of purpose. One day, a traveling craftsman arrived at the ranch, seeking work and offering his skills in return. He could repair equipment, make furniture, and help build new structures. Thomas welcomed him, recognizing the value of collaboration. Yana observed the craftsman at work, appreciating his craftsmanship and the care he took in his work. Together, the three of them improved the ranch, adding small innovations that made life easier and more productive. The arrival of the craftsman reminded them that even in remote places, new skills, knowledge, and support could make a significant difference. As the weeks passed, the ranch became a hub of activity. The animals thrived, the fields remained healthy, and the structures were sturdy and well-maintained. Thomas often reflected on how far they had come since Ayana first arrived. The ranch had transformed from a quiet, solitary place into a thriving, well-run homestead, capable of withstanding the seasons and providing a secure, productive environment. Yana, too, had changed. She had adapted to this new way of life while maintaining the wisdom, traditions, and resilience she had brought with her. She had learned new skills, managed challenges, and found a place where her knowledge was valued. The partnership between her and Thomas was a testament to patience, cooperation, and respect. Each had learned from the other, and together they had created a sustainable and harmonious life. One morning, as they walked along a ridge overlooking the ranch, Thomas paused to look out across the fields. The sun rose in the east, casting long shadows and painting the land in warm, golden light. He realized that the ranch had not only survived, but thrived because of teamwork, determination, and the willingness to embrace new ideas. Iana stood beside him, quiet but confident, her eyes reflecting the beauty of the land. Together they had faced challenges, weathered storms, and built something lasting. As autumn deepened, preparations for winter became more urgent. Thomas and Ayana harvested the remaining crops, stored firewood, and ensured the animals had sufficient shelter and food. The work was physically demanding, but the rhythm of it was satisfying. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, was a reminder of their combined effort and shared commitment. Even during the coldest nights, the warmth of their shared labor and cooperation made the ranch feel secure and welcoming. They also found time to reflect on the past. Sitting by the fire in the main house, Thomas spoke of the war, the losses he had endured, and the lessons he had learned. Iana listened, offering quiet understanding and occasional insight. She shared her own experiences, the challenges of displacement, and the traditions she had carried with her. These conversations were not heavy or sorrowful, but filled with wisdom, perspective, and recognition of each other's strength. The relationship between them had grown into something steady and profound. It was built on respect, collaboration, and shared purpose rather than drama or conflict. Each had found a companion capable of understanding, patience, and support. Together, they had created a life in which both could thrive, learn, and continue growing. The ranch was now a reflection of that harmony, with every fence, field, and barn standing as a testament to their shared efforts. As winter approached, snow dusted the peaks in the distance, and the plains took on a quiet, still beauty. Thomas and Ayanna made sure the animals were secure and well-fed, and that all preparations for the cold months were complete. They moved through the ranch with confidence, knowing that they had done everything possible to protect and care for the land and its inhabitants. The calm of the season was a reward for months of diligence and hard work. During one particularly clear evening, they sat outside under a sky filled with stars. The air was crisp, and the only sounds were the distant call of an owl and the soft rustle of the wind through the grass. Thomas spoke quietly, reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. "I never imagined the ranch could feel this alive," he said, glancing at Ayanna. "It's because of you. You've brought strength, wisdom, and hope into this place." Ayanna smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "It's not just me," she said softly. "It's both of us. We've built this together. And that's what makes it strong." Their words carried a sense of truth and mutual recognition, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. In the weeks that followed, the ranch continued to thrive even as the first snows arrived. The animals adapted to the cold, and the stored crops and firewood provided security. Thomas and Ayanna continued their routines, finding satisfaction in the steady rhythm of work and care. The ranch was no longer just a place of survival. It had become a sanctuary, a home, and a symbol of resilience. Visitors continued to come and go, bringing news, trade opportunities, and occasional assistance. Thomas and Ayanna welcomed them, sharing what they had learned and offering guidance when needed. Their experience on the ranch had taught them that cooperation and trust could create lasting stability, even in a world marked by unpredictability and challenge. One day, while repairing a section of fence after a strong windstorm, Thomas paused to look across the land. The snow had started to settle in patches, the fields blanketed in white, and the cattle huddled close for warmth. Ayanna joined him, carrying tools and supplies. They worked side by side, their movements coordinated and efficient. In that moment, Thomas realized that the ranch was more than a home. It was a reflection of their shared dedication, perseverance, and understanding. As winter deepened, the two continued to care for the ranch and each other. They spoke often of the future, discussing new plans, improvements, and goals. The ranch had become a place of stability and growth, offering opportunities for continued learning, prosperity, and connection with others. It was a living testament to the idea that even after hardship and struggle, people could create something meaningful and lasting through cooperation, respect, and patience. Through it all, Thomas and Ayanna's partnership remained steady. It was not defined by words alone, but by actions, shared responsibility, and understanding. Each day reinforced their bond, and the ranch reflected that bond in every field, fence, and barn. Together, they had built a life that was resilient, thriving, and full of promise. The story of the ranch was also a story of transformation. Both Thomas and Ayanna had come from difficult pasts, carrying the weight of war, displacement, and uncertainty. Yet through patience, collaboration, and trust, they had not only survived, they had flourished. The land had become a symbol of that growth, a tangible reflection of their effort, wisdom, and perseverance. In the quiet moments of winter, as the plains lay calm under a blanket of snow, Thomas and Ayanna often walked together through the ranch, observing the animals, the fields, and the structures they had maintained. They spoke of what they had accomplished, of lessons learned, and of the hope for the future. The ranch was no longer simply a place to live. It was a place to grow, to learn, and to continue building a life of stability and meaning. By the end of the season, the ranch stood strong against the cold. The animals were secure, the fields prepared for the next planting, and the structures reinforced to withstand storms. Thomas and Ayanna had created more than a home. They had created a legacy of resilience, cooperation, and hope. Their story was one of determination, adaptation, and trust. demonstrating that even in the face of past hardships, life could be rebuilt with patience, understanding, and care. As they stood together, watching the sun rise over the snow-dusted plains, Thomas felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had faced challenges, overcome obstacles, and built a life worth living. Yana stood beside him, strong, wise, and confident, a partner in every sense of the word. The ranch had become a testament to their shared effort, resilience, and hope for the future. In that moment, Thomas realized that life, no matter how difficult the past had been, always offered opportunities for growth, renewal, and meaningful connection. And together, they were ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the land, the animals, and each other would always be part of the journey.